Hello, a strange one-off message to preview the podcast this week. As you might well have realised, we're doing a special section at the moment called Jackanory, where one of us takes a subject and delivers a sort of heartfelt eulogy, a bit of a monologue without the others interrupting. We had Neil Clifford talking about how he loves the safety of the cabin of the motorcar, and we had Manish talking about Sir Sid Watkins last week, which was lovely as well. My chosen topic this week, I can't believe I'm saying this, was a rather difficult but exciting incident that I was involved with on Top Gear with Eddie Jordan. So you can understand why I'm speaking to you now. I had no idea that Eddie would pass away yesterday, and I'm pretty gutted because he was very kind to me, and I was very much influenced and also affected by my time with him. So I can't believe that this week's podcast has me talking about Eddie. It wasn't planned. I've thought about stripping it out, but actually it's a lovely story and it demonstrates some great Eddiness, so we've left it in. I'd like to talk more at length about Eddie in next week's podcast, but suffice to say, I've never met anyone like him, and I don't think I ever will. They won't make people like him again. He was everything that people thought he was and more. And the big problem with recalling Eddie Jordan stories is so few are actually really suitable for public consumption. They're that good. So, Eddie, this episode of the podcast is dedicated to you. I'm so glad that you had many more years after this incident, which could have probably curtailed life for both of us. But every time I spent time with you on Top Gear was a joy, and I look forward to it like a little child. So, Eddie, this one's for you. Hello, and welcome to the Car Podcast, episode number 29 with Chris Harris and his friends. If one of us looks like a robber, if you can't actually see us, you won't know this. It's because Chris Cooper has rather wittily stolen Neil Clifford's.
I haven't stolen it. I left it there.
How else do you find taking someone's property without them knowing?
I'm returning it to him via the medium of this podcast, and I'm very pleased that it wasn't a pair of underpants that Neil left.
I'd like to say you look like a robber, but you look a little bit like a sort of extravagant condom.
I think I look a little bit also like Benny from Crossroads, which is aging all of us.
So this week we begin with the subject, what we've just done in the last week with cars. Now, boy, have we had a little adventure. I've done so much with cars this week, I can't talk about it all. But the highlight was we agreed as a group last Friday to drive to Cornwall. And we'd have a little bit of a road trip. We wouldn't take much motorway. The four of us hadn't done this before. We'd take our four vehicles because, lo and behold, a certain Ferrari 456 by the name of Lola was ready and raring to be taken on a first outing. So we met in Somerset and we went to Babington House, treated ourselves to a really good slap-up breakfast. I have to say, a very, very high-quality breakfast. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford.
Yes, thank you, Neil.
Very much,
You're welcome.
And then we decided to waddle on down to Cornwall. Our cars were, Chris Cooper was in the Sausage, a.k.a. a lovely dark green Panamera Sport Turismo Turbo S with clear glass and ceramic brakes. Lovely car. Neil was in one very dark, beautiful silver special order Bentley Continental GT3Rs, no rear seats. I mean, on paper, one of the most pointless cars ever made. On the road, sensationally good. He also robbed it from a certain car auction website. And I was in my Integrale, which had just been totally rebuilt by Tank Barrett that week. And frankly, I was floating on a cloud of Italian loveliness because there's nothing better than having a car back that exceeds your expectations in the way that it drives. So thank you, Tank, and particularly Luke, for making me an engine that smacks it down the road with a speed I wasn't quite expecting. So yeah, we went off on our journey. And do you know what? It was lovely. We swapped orders. We waved at each other. We made rude gestures. We phoned each other. We did all the things that little boys do on road trips. It was really great fun. And we had our other halves with us as well. Three of us did. And anyhow, then we got near Honiton in Devon. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Manish.
So this is my first proper trip in Lola, completely retrimmed by O'Rourke's. And I was just sitting in Vomel 3218 beige loveliness with a little Luca Montezemolo shield just by the middle air vent. I was holding onto her gorgeously reupholstered steering wheel, non-perforated. I was just looking at that prancing horse in the middle thinking, I don't believe I own this. I don't believe today is even happening. In fact, I was so happy. I put on, and some people accuse me of having good taste in music. That's about to go down the toilet, but I put on Duran Duran's Rio, the album. Because you know what I was? I was a teenager driving a Ferrari. That is what I actually became. I was 14 years old, hacking down the A30 in my black Ferrari. And I'd heard both Mr. Cooper and Mr. Harris describing different sides of this car as incredibly beautiful. Mr. Harris said it had the most beautiful back end of a Ferrari, and Mr. Cooper said it had the most beautiful front end of a Ferrari, because I was following Mr. Cooper earlier. Yeah. Anyway, we were making gorgeous progress down the A30 when suddenly she started revving quite highly. Suddenly went from, this car was cruising at about 1,700 revs at 70 miles an hour. And suddenly she just went like that. She was doing 3,500 revs. And I noticed the speedometer went down to 0, but we were not doing 0. And then it kept coming up, kept going down. Then the ASR, which is the traction control light, came on, started flashing. Then the ABS light started to come on and flash. And then the battery light started to come on, and it didn't flash. It just stayed on. So fortunately, I think it was a B3177, wasn't it? I was just approaching that junction. I indicated, I pulled into the junction. I don't know the width of this car, so I think I was about 1.5 feet into the exit road, the slip road. But I pulled up, got my hazards on, got out of the car. About 30 seconds later, Mr. Harris sent me a text going, "Where are you? Drop me a pin. We will come round. Give me 10 minutes." Mm-hmm. And the posse arrived. It was fantastic. It was Mr. Cooper, Mr. Clifford, and Mr. Harris. It was actually, I've got to say, for somebody who'd broken down, I was in quite a good mood. Because to see these three guys turn up when you've had a breakdown, it's like the AA, the RAC, and whatever the American equivalent is. It was amazing. It was just the entire group. And I'm going to now pass over to Mr. Clifford.
Well, I suppose my little, because I have a lot of experience of these sorts of situations.
Where you can't see, that was Neil holding up a picture of the 456 in the lay-by on the exit slip to the B1777777.
There we go.
And here's another one.
There we go. And I think I was a couple of minutes behind. These two guys arrived earlier, and then I go into action disaster mode, like international rescue. And so I said, "Well, I'm off to, where did I go? Aldi in Honiton to buy a toolkit," because Chris rang me and said, "I think it's the alternator." And this is Mr. Cooper rang me and said, "I think it's the alternator. We need WD-40. Because I've spoken to my man in the farm, and he said, maybe you need some WD-40. And off I went. At the same time, I rang a certain Phil. We will only mention his name as Phil, and said, "This is the call that you thought could happen, but you were really hoping it doesn't happen. Phil, what should I do?" And I was told, disconnect the battery because it might need a reset. It might need a reset. This wasn't actually the case. But anyway, so I've not only rushed into Aldi to buy WD-40, which of course they don't sell, but I went across the road to the petrol station. It's about the only thing petrol stations do sell, because they don't sell anything for cars anymore. Mm-hmm. They sell fucking biscuits and things like that. So anyway, I had WD-40. I went into the Aldi and bought a 172-piece toolkit for $9.99. What could go wrong with that? And then off I sped and came back all the way around. What were we on, the A30? So you've got to go up the A30, down the A30, back down to the slip road, of which then I arrived at the scene of the crime. I suppose was the situation going on. What were we doing? I think we had the bonnet up, looking like real men, deciding what the fuck we should do now.
We were doing
So what
real
we
men
did was we isolated it, turned it on again. I started her up, and we had an airbag warning light on it, idled, and then it started to idle rough, and then all the lights came on the dashboards, and the alternator light was on. So it's quite clear the generator. Well, it didn't have enough voltage, and a car of that era has got so many control units that once it starts to lose voltage, everything just stops working. So I'm not a very good mechanic, but I thought it's got to be the alternator. Anyhow, at this point, Neil managed to speak to who?
Well, I then thought, fuck, where are we? We're in Devon. Who do I know in Devon that might be able to help with quick recovery? Because if we rang the AA, of course we love the AA, or if we rang the RAC, we love the RAC. That would take 7 hours because a man would come in his van and go, can't fix that, and bugger off and order the tow truck man, and that's our day buggered. So I ring Jess. Jess is the lovely son of Bob. Bob is the lovely Bentley hero of Bob Peterson. And I rang Jess and said, urgent, immediate, required advice. He listens to the podcast, so he said, oh no, it's the 456, I presume. And I said, yes, it is the 456. And we'd already hatched a plan because we thought we're not going to stick it on, take it back to London. What we're going to do, we're going to pick up the car and we're going to take it to Ferrari. Is it called Cars, Chris?
Cars Ferrari in Exeter.
Yes. So he said, Highfield Recovery. They're the people. They're the kings of Devon, and we'd like to thank Highfield Recovery. Here they are.
Very nice.
And I think it was Mark. Was it Mark? I think it was Mark, the guy, the recovery guy. And so we'd like to thank Highfield. They were there in 35 minutes.
Yeah, they were there.
Really fast.
Also, can I just say, how cool was that recovery truck?
Oh, very good.
And I've just noticed, I didn't notice the time, that its registration number is HB20 TOW.
Yes.
They have a fleet of them because we followed HB18 TOW back up the A30 the next day.
They've just got it all sorted, haven't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good
So
lads.
Mark picked us up, and then what happened, Mr. Cooper? I can't really remember. We sort of got the car onto the van. Didn't
Well,
we?
I think I'll tell you what happened is that managed by this stage, I think he was. This was a big test of his humour. Really, a breakdown is a big test of your humour and your perseverance. And there was a bit of a bit of nudging, but we weren't giggling. But it was a bit of sort of, where's the 456 is broken down? What else is a bear going to take a shit in the woods? So for us, it wasn't unusual or unlikely this was going to happen. So we phoned Cars Ferrari. I phoned Cars Ferrari and thought, do you know what? Maybe being on telly might help here. And they were lovely. Straight away, they said, oh, is it your 456? I went, no. Do you listen to the podcast? And this lovely lady went, no, I don't. But I did like your 12 cylindry video. I said, oh, that's very kind of you. But she said, send the car here. This was at sort of 2-3 o'clock. So there wasn't long to go in the day. And they said, we've got an hour left. We'll get someone to look at it this evening, but we probably won't get back to you. We'll call you on Monday morning, but the car will be safe with us. And the decision was made for Manish not to chase around after Lola and follow her to Exeter, just to get in the car, a car with some back seats, which only one of us had, and then move on. Mr. Cooper, what happened then?
So, luckily, I did have a car with me with back seats because Mrs. Cooper and I, Lynn, we've been talking the day before about, because I want to take the Alpine. We've mentioned Keith, but I just need to little thank you to Keith. Keith is the Caleb on our farm, or maybe Caleb is the Keith on Mr. Glasson's farm. And I had a little trouble with my Alpine last week. It first of all wouldn't start, or it ran on 3 cylinders. And I thought, coil pack's gone. It's only 6 years old. I've had this as new. He said, no, it'll be fuel. It's been sat in the winter. So I took some fuel out, put some new super unleaded in. Hey, presto. It then dumped all the coolant later that day. and he said, I'll sort it. It'll be a hose come off, which he sorted. So we called Keith from the side of the A30, and he could tell we were by the side of a fast moving motorway. And straight away he said, it's a 456 broken down. And I said, Keith, you work on a farm with tractors. He's like with tractors what we are with cars. He's always buying and selling tractors. There's always the next tractor. And I said, yeah, it is. I said, tell me about it. And I said, lost voltage. He said, the alternator. Has it been sat not running for about 6 months? I said, yes, it has. He said, it'll be the alternator. The brushes will have corroded or furred up. Bit of WD-40 in there will clear it. It'll be fine. Battery should be fine. So we did all that, as Neil has said. Unfortunately, there's a big cover around everything. So we ended up on the back of a truck. Nice Mr. Highfield. So luckily, because we hadn't brought the Alpine, because we thought it was going to be a bit chilly, Manish wasn't sat by the side of the road waiting for something to happen to help him to get there.
So the great thing about social media can be evil, but social media can also be rather lovely. So I posted a photograph of myself with, I think, Mark from the recovery truck on Instagram as a story. And immediately I got a message from Tank Barrett saying, is it the Integrale ? With a sense of panic. And I could reply, no, it was the other Italian car, but it was going to be one of us, Manish, wasn't it? And frankly, you took one for the team this time. Next time it'll be me. Furthermore, I then looked at, because there was a bit of time to kill. Just before we left, I looked at my Instagram account and I had a message that pinged up from Charlie McKenzie, which read, whilst driving to a boat racing event with my dad and listening to the podcast, we saw a very nice Lancia, Ferrari and Bentley in the lay-by. Hope Lola is okay. P.S. It's made my day seeing you guys. I replied, ha, 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 Lola has had a tantrum. To which he quite brilliantly replied, oh no, hopefully she gets over her tantrum soon. My dad is also trying to work out if he can tow my race boat with an Integrale. So, clearly, there are sorts of people.
They are.
So after that, onwards we travelled down to Cornwall.
So we went all the way down the A30, and we
Lovely
went
road.
Very nice road, nice good dual carriageway, and we went to St Maurs, and we stopped en route. We stopped on the way to cross the Foul River on the King Harry ferry. How lovely a spot is that? All three of the cars, sans the recalcitrant. A lovely little, put a few photographs up on when we do that. Floated across the Foul, onto the Roseland, nice little meander, into St Maurs. And we all sat in our house in the front of St Maurs having a nice cup of tea, saying, thank goodness we're all here. And what a lovely, and I have to say, I can't remember the last time I did a trip with mates in cars together, rather than when we went to Germany years ago, there might have been 2 cars, Chris, but not like 4 of us in 4 cars.
It's much better. One person
per car.
Really,
really good fun. It was just such good. We didn't misbehave too much. When we got the emergency message that you were stuck, I was wondering, Manish, how you knew, because you were most insistent that you were stuck by the B3177. And then when we got there, we could see that right by you, there was a sign with B3177 in 6-foot high letters. I thought, it's amazing for Manish to know that, but then I realised actually it's pretty obvious. So it was just it was a really lovely trip to drive down. And when we got that message to go, Chris was behind me, and I thought, this is a real emergency. We need to get there as soon as possible because, it's Manish and Lola. Anything can happen in the wilds of the A30 in lovely, peaceful West Devon. So we did make some progress. There was a little junction we had to come off and double roundabout and so forth. And it was only on the slip road back up the road where I had it properly pinned and a nicely sort of opening left-hander. Did Mrs. Cooper at that point say, that's enough of that?
And I was so disappointed because I had to back off before that because my better half was sitting there with the but the case to the DJI Osmo that I use quite a lot at the moment, and it was open, and basically it landed on me as she nearly landed on my lap on that roundabout, and everything. We lost the microphone, the stand, everything. But in that situation, what's more important, losing all the kit or staying pinned to your mate's bumper, absolutely wide open third? You can buy another Osmo.
You can do all those things. Yeah. I mean, then we got to some more. We had a lovely cup of tea, and we had a nice dinner in the Idle Rocks, which was very nice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper, for that. That was a dinner.
It was very, very, very nice. So it was. We got to do it again. It was just four blokes in 4 cars. It bloody works.
Can I also say, just a note to the group, it's well known now that I don't like a certain type of crustacean. This hotel had massive brass crabs that sat on tables with their claws up in that sort of aggressive, like the Prodigy album cover, but worse.
Yeah.
And they kept moving them close to me during drinks and during the meal. I didn't find it funny. Neil's showing a picture of one of these bloody things now, and they were being encouraged by my better half. They all found it absolutely hilarious.
It was
hilarious. More crabs. No more crabs, please, lads. Okay, no more crabs.
And the update from Cars.
Yep, is.
Okay, so the air conditioning pump
condenser.
Compressor.
Air conditioning condenser thing, isn't it?
Condenser. Basically, it was knackered. It started leaking fluid. The alternator's right underneath it, so it was leaking onto the alternator. The alternator therefore failed. So they're going to recondition the condenser. They're going to put in a new alternator. They're going to recharge the system, and hopefully she'll be back in loving hands in Exeter in about 2 weeks. And then I'll drive her back, but I'm not going to do it without one of you following or leading. That is the plan.
So when are you there again, Manish?
I think it's going to be about 2 weeks. That's what they're saying. It'll be about 2 weeks when it's done.
The other thing I'd like to mention with the lovely recovery people, which I know we might all know this, but I didn't have the app, is it was not where are you, what road are you on, which we all know this exists, but it was what 3 words. And we gave them, I quickly looked and managed, we looked it up, didn't we, when we're in the car, and bang, exactly to the 1 square meter or whatever it is, they know exactly where you are. So a bit of advice from me, because I didn't have it and I've now done it, is have that app, because it's really bloody clever.
Yeah,
you do need a signal though, don't you, for that?
You do need a signal, but then if I didn't have had a signal, I wouldn't have been able to ring the recovery people.
Yeah, true. I thought the 4 cars gathered together with us standing around, that was also a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, no, it was. But anyway, I thought that was quite I must get that.
What 3 words? That's good. I'm going to download that one. It's a good.
And then we obviously forgot to have, we didn't have a booster.
No, go pack.
We didn't have a fire extinguisher. Actually, we didn't have anything, which probably we should have packed some of that shit, shouldn't we? Or advise Manish. We need to give Manish a list of things that you should buy when you're driving a 90s Ferrari, probably.
If I'd seen that scene, I would have laughed out loud and had to phone one of you and said, right, you won't believe what I've just seen. I've just seen a 456 with its bonnet up, and they're using an integrale as the warning triangle 100 yards before it on the hard shoulder. Well, who are these people? Why are they allowed out in society? Yeah. They should be incarcerated.
That's always true.
Yeah.
Right. So we then came back. Well, some of us stayed down in St. Maur. Some of us raced back and went to Twickenham to watch a certain rugby victory, the likes of which I've never seen before. And then some of us decided to stay up and watch the Grand Prix at 4 a.m. The next topic of conversation is the first race of the season, which I think we could talk about for about 4 hours, because frankly, it was Formula One at its very, very finest. It was a brilliant race. It's asked more questions than it's answered, as all great races should. And I'm going to pass over to Chris Cooper for some summary thoughts.
Gosh, where to start with this? I mean, it was a great race. Confirmed McLaren are pretty quick. Oscar and Lando pretty evenly matched. They both made a mistake, slightly bigger one for Oscar, so Lando got it. But there's a few other things that struck me that I thought we should reflect on. The biggest word that came out of watching that race for me is confidence. I don't think people realize quite how hard it is to drive those kinds of cars on that kind of track in the wet. I hadn't realized that's the fourth fastest circuit in Formula One.
Yeah.
It's faster than Spa. It's a street circuit with lots of white paint and stuff on the track. And some of the rookies came a bit unstuck. I felt Isaac Hadjar, if you followed F2 last year, he's very shouty, very emotional, quite difficult at times. And I thought him and Yuki in one team, it's just going to be a shouting and swearing fest. He was quite good practice and quali. And then he came a cropper on the green flag lap. I mean, we've all done, it made me think about, Chris, you never let me forget this one. The first corner of the first lap of the 2007 Nürburgring 24-hour race in the wet. The first corner of the first lap of 24 hours. And I lost it on some white lines.
Oh, no.
And I got sideways and I got collected by somebody. So we spent an hour and a half in the pits rebuilding the car. We spent weeks and months training. And it was just so I went from wanting to shout at him last year to wanting to give him a big hug. Luckily, Anthony Hamilton got there first and gave him a big hug.
Yeah, that was very cool.
That was very, very cool. Lewis looked bereft of confidence. He got shuffled by Charles round the outside of turn 1 and then into turn 2 near the beginning of the race. And then he got pretty slam dunked by Oscar on the last lap of the race in that very, very fast chicane towards the back of the circuit. He looked bereft of confidence. You can't overestimate how important confidence is. It goes beyond talent, it goes beyond how fast the car is, it goes beyond all of your expectations and experience about, hey, it's wet, Lewis is going to be quick today. Yeah, we know Lewis is really quick in the wet. And yet, it's interesting, I saw after the race weekend, I saw a little interview with Anthony that he'd done with Martin Brundle on the grid. And Anthony said something really revealing. Because Martin said to him, hey, look, new uniform, but hey, you've got lots of rookies here. You guys have done it all before. And he said, no, we feel like rookies again. We feel like we're starting Formula One all over again. And I thought that was really, really revealing because it revealed the humanity and the inner human being. Lewis is a god and a rock star. As we've discussed when the whole Ferrari thing was announced, and he went there and appeared in red for the first time in January. But on that first day, on the grid, in the wet, thinking, I'm not really sure I understand this car. He was that little boy, young man from 2007 again. So confidence is a really, really big thing. People don't know how hard it is. They're paid very well. They're hugely fortunate. We'd all love to do it.
I wouldn't.
You would. You'd like to sit there. We'd all like to do something about it.
If
So
you've
I
got
thought it was
no
an amazing
confidence
race.
and no talent, I think it might be a bit tricky.
Talent's not getting in my way either. So I thought it was a brilliant race.
I'll tell you what's interesting about the confidence observation, which totally backs up what you're saying. Confidence in a car with 1,000 horsepower and no traction control manifests itself really in knowing what happens when you step a bit over the limit and when the car starts to move around. And there was that one lap of mayhem where they all fell off. That's because most of them had the confidence to think, I don't mind if it steps out a bit. Who was the one driver that tiptoed round because he clearly didn't want the back end of the car moving out at all?
Max.
Lewis.
Oh.
No, it was Lewis.
Yeah, it was Lewis.
All the others were letting the car move around quite a lot. Max was just too good. He caught his when it slid. But Lewis didn't. His whole strategy was not to push it so it slid around, and that actually is what saved him on that mayhem lap. He just tiptoed round.
Yeah.
Watching Max come down the pit road to go. Do you remember? I mean, it was literally. It's outrageous. Anyhow, I'm going to go to Manish now. So, Manish, what are your thoughts?
I mean, 6 headlines, and I'm not going to talk about all of them, but just McLaren, I put the word supremacy next to it. I put down Ferrari. I put down the words pace versus competency next to it. Williams, I just wrote down Russell, real contender. Antonelli, vindicating Toto. Now, I remember I was the one who famously said, I think Toto's studying too much data. But I have to say, apart from qualifying, Antonelli was pretty impressive. Red Bull, I just wrote Max Verstappen. That's all I wrote. He is. I'm going to say something big now, but I think he is the best driver since Senna. I think that he's just that good. He's acrobatic. He's intelligent. He's incisive. Oh, Neil, no one will ever be better than Senna, but Max is certainly up there. Then I just thought Alex Albon and Yuki Tsunoda. Those two just did not put a foot wrong. And I think if Yuki did not have the Duff strategy right at the end, I mean, what a drive.
Yeah.
And I think he must be making Red Bull think, what sort of decision making are we really making? And then literally my last point was rookies. Hadja, you've talked about. Lawson, bit of a mare. The person we've not talked about is Bortoletto. And I know he lost it in the race. Apparently he had a long brake pedal and he was fighting it.
Yeah, that's not my list of excuses. I did that at the Nürburgring, long brake pedal. Yeah.
So, okay. We can have that, Chris. But all I would say is that Autosport today put the lap times of teammates against each other. They had Russell and Antonelli, and they also had Bortoletto and Hülkenberg. And Bortoletto and Hülkenberg in the long stint, they're just identical lap times, even coming down. I have a feeling he is scarily good, actually. And then my last little note was, under rookies, Lewis, 357 race starts. Alonso, 402 race starts. And I think the point I'm making is in the old Senna era, Lewis will have been driving this year in his 23rd season in Formula One, Alonso in his 26th. And that's how much it's changed. And you know, we did our little thing, didn't we, where we made predictions. I have a feeling that McLaren is gone. And I'm going to really stick my neck out there because I think if you saw, had we not had a wet race, I mean, both of them put 16 seconds on Max Verstappen. You just don't do that. You don't put 16 seconds on Max Verstappen, and there are not both of you unless you've got a chariot underneath you. And I think Ferrari probably, you know, Vasseur was saying, well, we kind of underperformed and our true pace was seen in Q2 and all the rest. Well, I'm not sure. I think McLaren, now, I'm not saying things don't reverse. Last year at this time, I think McLaren was 7/10 off the pace. By the end of the season, they were the best team, but there is something that looks mighty quick about that car. It's obviously an easy car to drive, but the scary bit's the balance. And I was reading today that Red Bull's real moan about these flexi rear wings is balance. They managed for 2 years to have a car that was perfectly balanced by what it did underneath the car. Then Mercedes and McLaren allegedly had the flexi front wings, which helped their balance. Now they're using flexi rear wings. And I think you saw the FIA just jumped on it immediately. They don't wait till race 9. They want to stop these wings flexing at all. But I think that McLaren is a scarily balanced car because it's a very funny formula where you have guys who are just brilliantly quick in sector 1 in qualifying, brilliantly quick in sector 2 in qualifying, and by sector 3, they've cooked their tyres. And that just tells you this is a very weird formula. I think it's going to be enormously circuit and weather dependent, but I think McLaren have a feeling that car is super duper 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 duper. That's it.
No Clifford.
Well, that would be great, I suppose, because Lando hopefully can win the championship, and that would be really good, wouldn't it?
Amazing. Wonderful.
No, I
Wonderful.
think, you know, I don't know whether it's... Are we supposed to just wave our flags in Formula One? I don't suppose. It's not quite a nationalistic sport, isn't it? But we would want a Brit to win it, wouldn't we? Lando or George or Lewis, obviously.
Yeah.
So hopefully it is Lando. My, you know, I actually got up for it.
Good man.
And I suppose the rain is magic. You almost couldn't have made up how it was like a movie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And not as if I'm a miserable sod, because we all want to look like Brad Pitt when he's however old he is. He's like 87 or something, and he looks like 12, and we all want to look like him. But I can't really see the point of an F1 movie when you can just watch that.
Yeah.
It's
But
just
we will still
better.
watch it, though, won't we?
It's why they've never made an amazing film about football, because real football is better than watch make-believe football. And I think it's going to be tough to spend however much they've spent on that 300 million, 500 million, whatever. You can just watch the real thing. It's better, probably, isn't it? Because it was incredible, wasn't it?
I think it might be the best season opener I can remember.
Oh, I can't remember one better than that. It was amazing.
A lot of people are talking about Drive for Survival at the moment, but I mean,
that's good. That's good.
It's living on borrowed time compared to that, though. That race had it all. And I mean,
it did. That's right.
Several observations to add to what people have said so far, much of which I do agree with, but I verge off in certain areas. First of all, how nice to have an incident-fueled race, but without big accidents. I really like that, because quite often when you have these wet races, you get a bit drunk on that. Oh, he's hit that, he's clipped that, but then you have that awful moment where you sort of see a bit of wreckage out the corner of a shot, and you go, "Oh God, there's a big one." Now, do I feel guilty that I was getting a bit drunk on the fact that people were crashing? I love the fact there wasn't a biggie, and normally when there is one at Australia, it is a biggie.
Yeah.
I thought the McLaren dominance in quali was telling, but I just love the fact that regardless, you've got this Verstappen character that's just he's going to keep them honest. If they make a single mistake, and this formula is about mistakes, if they make a single mistake, they've got this automaton animal that will hunt them down, and that's the story of the season, isn't it? I'm afraid I don't even think Ferrari are in the story at the moment.
No.
But I know people are saying McLaren are that fast, but Max was only beaten by 0.2 of a second. We had all sorts of safety cars, I know, and he had to fight his way back. But for those last few laps, he was a massive threat. And I just came away thinking he was the best driver by a mile in that race. There were lots of other impressive performances. I know he made a couple of mistakes. But his presence, he's got a Senna-like presence. Just people just knowing he's around, they shit themselves. And to have that, the way you can present yourself to other drivers, it's a bit like what Maradona used to do on a football pitch, isn't it? Just the people knew he was there, and they were suddenly jelly legs. So I thought Antonelli made an overtake on Albon in the race that was go see if you can find it. Go watch it. It's mind bending. Just the road conditions are just terrible. And his hands on the steering wheel are so relaxed. He just literally he does this. He's doing 170 between walls. He just goes in the way. It's none of this. It's incredibly composed. And I think even though the rookies had a pretty torrid time of it, there's this sense that there's another generation coming through, and they're even faster, aren't they? They're even. And if I was Toto, I'd be going, best of luck, Lewis. But I love Lewis. I think he's great, but I'm sorry, Antonelli's probably getting more out of that car than Lewis would have done. Is what it looks like to me.
Can I just say one other thing? That just something that Manish mentioned that made me think about something the boys and I talked about this week. Formula One is 75 years old this year. Alonso started when it was 50 years old. Alonso has done 1/3 of Formula One.
Yeah,
scary.
Well, he was a headline for all the wrong reasons. He gave I've put a clip up on our group, and we can't really forward it, but Alonso gave a very unfortunate interview where he effectively was asked, do you feel worried?
What have you got that they haven't? Yeah.
That some of the people on the grid were born in 05 and 06. And he went, well, no, not really, because I've got massive advantage. I've got two advantages. One, I've driven the circuit before. And two, if it rains, I've got the experience. And then it just hard cuts to him going backwards up against the wall, followed by the Curb Your Enthusiasm music. That's the clip that you get on the internet. It's a bit cruel, but I didn't expect that from Fernando. And, that was a very unusual mistake. Stroll actually had a really quite good race in the end.
Massive.
I know.
Yeah.
So Alonso said that he came off on someone else's gravel. That's what he said.
Yeah,
can't
I've
remember
done
who-
that. I've done that.
Stop it, Cooper. So all in all, I thought it was utterly fascinating, but
Yeah.
um,
Roll on China.
it doesn't alter my opinion that actually Max is the class of the field.
he's
I just couldn't believe the performance he drags out of these
Terrifyingly
cars.
good.
I think
Terrifyingly.
we have to mention, don't we? What's the? I'm such an idiot. My brain is dead. Who's the Mercedes driver who's British?
George Russell.
George
George
Russell.
Russell.
George Russell. Oh God, what a muppet. He did great, didn't he?
Brilliantly.
He
Third.
did put a foot wrong.
I think
and
he was pretty
Not put a foot
cool. He
wrong.
doesn't look like he sweats. He's like Superman.
What, Prince Andrew?
I think he sweats.
Yeah, he does. He does more these days. I feel I'm a big fan of George because I kind of see he's quite geeky and sort of some bit nerdy, and I feel some sympathy for that for obvious personal reasons. But he spent the last 3 years being overshadowed by Lewis, greatest
That's
driver
right.
ever.
Yeah.
And now he's got Toto's love child and wonder kid, Antonelli. What does he have to do to get a break? All he can do is do what he did in Australia, which was drive the socks off it and make zero mistakes.
No mistakes. Absolutely.
He was super quick, zero mistakes, confident, mature. Good for him.
We're going to break away from that because that's gone on for 48 minutes. We're going to have the last of our increasing in value algorithm-based choose a shed cars. What do we get up to?
59.
£59,000.
Money.
Start to go down again next week. Don't worry about it. How on earth we've managed to keep this feature going so long, I don't know. I think it's because none of us is brave enough to say we should stop doing this, but we'll keep going. £59,000 shed. Over to you, Neil Clifford, who's been boasting today, by the way.
Yeah.
None of you is going to beat my shed.
Oh, that's true. May I just mention, Mr. Cooper knows this, that Clever Jason has prepared for us. We're not, I think, going to use this, but Clever Jason has prepared a spreadsheet that continues this feature up until week 60, where
Oh my
it's
God.
1,830,000.
We could just do that bloke thing, which is just going straight to the 1,800,000 next week.
Yes. Clever Jason will remain only named as Clever Jason, but we do love him. And
Very clever, he's lovely.
that little Excel spreadsheet would have taken me about 4 weeks, and it took him about probably 13 seconds. Anyway, when you've got clearly a lot of money, it's not shed money unless your shed is made of gold. And if you're me thinking about this money, and you've already done the Porsche, and you've already done the Ferrari, there's only one mark left, in my view, that when you're on Car and Classics or Piston Heads or Auto Trader, wherever you go, and sponsorship is still available for any of these people, what do you search? Any guesses?
Bentley.
No.
Porsche
That's right.
911.
No, we've done Porsche. You've
Maserati.
got to search Aston Martin.
There we
Yeah.
go.
You've got to, you've done your Ferrari thing, you've done your sensible Porsche thing, you've done your risky Ferrari thing. Bentley, I accept, and I think maybe we've done Bentley Continental GT. I think Manish did a 17 grand smoker, didn't you? With one previous owner was Gummidge or whatever it is, 15 grand for a Continental GT. So Aston Martin. So I went onto a well-known classic car app in green. It's known as the green one. And I did the search at, I think it's 60K.
Yeah.
And what do you get? You get an unbeatable, in my view, car, he says, now trying to find the bloody thing, or I will find it. You get a Vantage V12 manual.
Yeah.
Leggy mind.
Only 60,000 miles. Only 60,000 miles. Here it's. Have I got the bloody thing? And Where did I? Oh, yes, here. I did do it. See, I promise I did do it. Here you go. In a light green manual. It's had all of the things fixed because it's 60,000 miles. So the warranty work has been extensive. And it is in Hardley Green. That's a nice name for a green.
It's a good name for a green.
Because it's hardly green. It looks silver, in fact. But it's hardly green. With black leather, which is a bit of a shame. Contrasting yellow calipers. And it's got the upgraded stereo, and it's 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds and does 201 miles an hour. It is British. It is a V12. It is manual. It is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And no one's going to beat that. And it's 58 grand.
Yeah, it's one of those cars where you just go, really? Is it 50? Can you get that for 58 grand?
You can.
Yeah.
Manish, what are you going for? £59,000.
Well, I mean, there is only one car that you can go for this. It's actually listed as 59,950 on piston heads. But if I go for this, I reckon I can get the 950 off. And it is a Ferrari 456 MGT PK because you've got to have two.
You've
want to use one. That is
just because there's a better chance that one will be working.
Exactly.
Two,
I think you need to have two. That is my second car.
You're more than welcome to have it.
Thank you very much.
Chris Cooper.
The problem is there isn't only one car.
Ah.
59 grand. I've got bloody loads of them. So I can say it's not the Bentley Continental GT GTVS. It's not that. It could be. It's not that.
Yeah.
Gorgeous,
it could be.
He's holding pictures up. Those that can't see, he's holding pictures up now.
Good pictures.
It could be an E92 M3 comp, 10,000 miles, 11,000 miles, but it isn't.
Overvalued.
It very, very nearly was a Ferrari 360 Manuel.
Yeah, good.
You're going to leave anything for me?
37,000 miles.
Clearly not.
It could have been, but it isn't. A Lexus LC500. I mean, what a car.
I like the look of those.
Neil would have looked at, but he couldn't go for a 997 Gen 2 turbo.
Right, you're straying into wanker territory here. You've got to leave one car for me.
There's now a winner. It's the last of the series. Who gives a fuck?
Right.
It's meaty, beefy, big and Britishy.
Rolls Royce.
Close, but better.
Mulsanne.
Exactamundo. Exactamundo.
Nice.
Mon frère.
Yeah.
It is facelift.
Yeah.
On a 66 plate. Non-speed. Most importantly, it's got those monstrously lovely monoblock wheels.
They're good wheels.
Yeah. What a car. What a car.
I sign off for the excess and irritation with that, the Mulsanne.
Fantastic.
Good car.
I still think I've got the winner here.
We'll be the judge of that.
Because I think that potentially, if, let's say, someone had restored a Lancia Delta Integrale 8-valve cat and put a 16-valve engine in it with a shit ton of horsepower and torque, and it owed them so much money, I kid you not, it owed them so much money that it might not even make the budget for this segment of this podcast.
Go on.
At some point, they might need to realise some of that money, despite the fact they love the car. I would say that Integrale was the best car you could buy for the money, because I've done 800 miles in it in a week, which I didn't think I'd want to do. But it's totally renewed my love for lighter, older cars that squeak and rattle and go like a stabbed rat on a B road, but are pretty woeful on a motorway. And there's a picture of it in St Maurs. And I have to say, 59 grand. I'm not selling it, but it's definitely worth the money.
It definitely is. I have to say that is the winner, because Mr. Harris very kindly let me drive it on Saturday morning.
Ooh.
In the Roseland. So we got out of the village at very sedate, quiet speed, because I sort of need to live there and not upset anybody. But on the road from outside St Maurs up to Tregony, quite quiet Saturday morning. My God, what a thing. Boost, yes, it's got some boost and some lag. But actually, as you said this, Chris, and I think it is the most wonderful compliment you can make about it. It's like a Renault 5 GT Turbo gone mad, but with nicer balance. It's so small. You kept on saying to me, ignore the squeaks and the rattles. I didn't think it had any squeaks and rattles. I thought it was the steering. Oh, you just hold it. Even straight ahead, you think that's got weight in it. You put a little bit of lock into it and you feel the weight. You can feel everything in the front end. I said, is this assisted steering? Yeah, it's assisted steering, but very, very subtly done. I would honestly, I know it probably cost you a bit more than the offer price for this segment of the podcast, but bloody hell, if you sold it for that, I'd buy it. It's a winner.
Chris overtook me a couple of times just to film Lola.
To film, that's the reason why, yeah. Nothing what to do with fun. To do with
there was someone in the car as a passenger filming.
But oh my god, the noise and the acceleration! I was just going, and then he just pulled back. He just pulled back. What a thing!
Yeah,
what a thing!
So much more fun blowing, a few quid on having something done like that than buying a new car. I know. I'm totally into it. Right, this has gone on quite a long time now. I've got a Jackanory here for you. It's my turn in the chair this week, so you'll have to just tais-toi and listen for a bit. I won't take too long, but I thought I'd choose a subject that I've not really spoken much about publicly. It was an incident that happened quite a long time ago. In fact, someone's written about it in a book. And it happened on Monday, the 29th of January, 2018. Obviously, Manish is thrilled by it because he's got up and walked out, which I think is fantastic. So I that day or the night before, I'd flown to the south of France, to Nice, where someone picked me up in a minivan and took me to a weird little ibis in the hills above Nice, because that's where the Monte Carlo Rally had just been running. And Top Gear had decided to organise a film that involved the new Alpine A110. And I was supposed to be driving this car in a test where we would effectively find out, I think Eddie Jordan and I would find ourselves in amongst some cars. I'd drive onto a stage, and that was good to say. I'd drive onto the stage of a rally. And then the cars we'd have a bit of a dice with the cars, and we'd demonstrate how light the car was. It was a cool idea for a film. We still had mega budgets back then. It was really great. And they had the classic A110 from Renault that opened the filming. Anyhow, I always remember getting there the night before, seeing EJ, who is, I know some people get irritated by him, but he's one of the great human beings. He's just so much charisma. He could, he's up there with a Montezemolo style charisma. It's ridiculous. He's a great raconteur. All he wants to do is tell stories, and they're all great stories. And so I sat down with him the night before, and he always says, "You owe me everything. I made you." So I sat down. He went, "I made you," across the. We shouted, "I made you," across the bar. We were in an ibis. It's like, I don't think anyone cares here, really. He wanted to have a beverage, and I remember saying to him, "I'm tired. I think tomorrow's going to be quite a long day. I won't have a drink. I love you to bits, but I'm going to go to bed." And the way the day turned out afterwards, I was really glad that actually I hadn't had that drink. So we started filming the next morning, and they set up a fake start for rally cars, and I got myself in a bit of a telling off from some of the crew, because if you get to see a World Rally Car, and that was the first year of the Yaris, I think, doing a full ball start with, full anti-lag, full everything, and there's several of them doing it. You want to see it. But I was supposed to be, there were like 4 of them going off the line, and we were the 5th car in the filming run. And I wanted to watch the cars go off the line. So I just got out of the car unbelted and went and watched them go off the line. Of course, that meant I had to get myself belted up and go again, and I messed all the filming up. But I don't regret it. I saw them earlier. I still got the films I filmed every single car going off the line with my phone, because it had the new slow-mo function. You could see the wheels moving at different speeds with the diffs changing everything. And so EJ and I went off, and then we watched them film a couple of the rally cars doing beautiful handbrake turns on some slightly Stelvio style passes. It was a bit more terrainy actually, but it was a beautiful day. It was one of those days that it didn't seem real. Really, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was January, but it felt like it was 15 degrees in the sunshine. And then we were given free rein for myself and Eddie to go and film the Alpine together. And the way that filming works for television, especially in what I call inefficient productions, is there still is a level of efficiency that means that you don't just go and shoot an onboard. There's going to be a tracking car around you, tracking you at the same time, or there's going to be a couple of guys or girls on sticks, or there's going to be a drone. They're going to be getting something. And we went up and down this pass, and I got more and more confident, and I thought the car was fantastic. I really did. It was my first experience of this little mid-engine car. I knew it was a pre-production vehicle. I'd already spoken to Renault about that. EJ was happy in the passenger seat, pretending to call notes, which was basically him either playing the spoons or just yelling something at me. But he was pretty comfortable as well, because the car was moving around quite a lot. We had some quite big angles. I didn't feel I was taking any risks. And it was really, really good fun. Eddie's a great passenger. And of course, he's got his hearing aid thing. So he's a bit selective about what he'll hear, really, which I love. So sometimes he'll hear you and next time he'll ignore you for 10 minutes. But I remember we were going downhill fast, and sliding cars on hairpins downhill isn't easy. And when next time you watch some rally footage, try and look at the gradient. If they're going uphill, it's much easier than going downhill. Sliding cars downhill, the road runs out on the exit much sooner than you think. And I always think it requires massive confidence. And these roads, if you get it wrong, there's no crash barriers, there's no Armco, really. There's very little. You're going on to the next step down. You know, they're all terraced effectively, and you're going up 30, 40 foot down. It's going to hurt. You're probably going to break your back. So there's real skill from them. And I was being a bit cautious. Anyhow, we were going on an uphill section. And I remember saying to Eddie, I think I said, I've lost power. I'm losing power. What's going on? And then I went to touch the brake and the pedal went to the floor. And I thought, that's a bit weird. And the car sort of coasted towards a lay-by. But I'd wiped a load of speed off because we had a sort of uphill, a sort of curve that meant that I could scrub some speed off. And then I got to this lay-by and I realised the car was on fire. And there was quite a lot of flame coming up the side of the car. And Eddie wasn't quite aware of it. It was coming up my side, left-hand drive, more than it was Eddie's. But it was definitely starting to lick underneath the car and coming up both sides. And I wanted him out. So I uttered an expletive and told him to get out, which he did. I didn't have to drag him out. I got round to his side, but he was already out. We got out the car. And there was a lot of fire. The car was completely engulfed in fire within seconds. And then the crew, there was no fire extinguisher with the crew, which, whether we should have had one for a car like that, I don't know. And we stood there and watched it burn, and it made some big bangs. And there was a lot of, it was quite a sight to behold. And at the time, you just think, well, it's just another one of those things, isn't it? You put yourself in that situation. But it was a bit more serious than I thought. It took me a long time to realise this afterwards. I'm a bit like this. I tend to have scrapes and I don't really think about them for a while. And the reason why I'm thinking about it now is there's this book called Inside the Machine. I've promoted it before by a guy called David Twellig, who worked for Renault at the time, or Alpine. He's a regular writer on the intercooler. He's one of those rare finds, I think, who writes with a clarity, I think, and an enjoyment that means he should probably have been a journalist. It's great writing. And this book is interesting. Anyhow, he was the person in charge of he was the chief engineer, really, for the Alpine. And it's in his book where he says, Monday the 29th of January 2018, and he explains that the day things got a bit complicated for him. He phoned me after this event and said, I need to find out what happened and I need you to help me. So began a sort of forensic investigation by Renault at a corporate level, like quite, the way that you'd investigate an aircraft crash, because they had to find out. Because the first thing that he did, and I was looking at this book here, was that day he had to issue a stop. Next, I had to issue a stop order for every car in existence. So every Alpine that existed on that day, in any department, you had to hand the keys back and stop. So you couldn't sell them, you couldn't drive them, you couldn't do anything until they could work out what had gone wrong.
Okay.
I'd never been involved in something like this. I mean, looking back, it's quite exciting. I feel sad for Renault. The ultimate outcome is good because the car has been lauded, and 2 people on this podcast own them, and they're wonderful. But that day, it almost didn't happen. The car almost never. It could have been stopped because it was such a serious incident. So we watched the car burn, and then the next day, the car, what was left of the car, was pretty much just a sort of skateboard, a flat piece of floor, but it had melted itself to the tarmac. So they dug up the tarmac with what was left of the shell and transported it back to Paris at vast cost. And the Renault, being such a large company, had when a car burns, a specialist. They call them thermal incidents, don't they, in the trade? And they began forensic analysis of what happened to this car, and I was sort of partly privy to it. And David outlines it in his book, but and I urge you to buy it. It's really interesting. Obviously, I've got a personal interest in it, but it was fascinating reading again what it was like, and things like he couldn't get the second. He needed 2 drivers because of their tacho rules to get this thing that had fused to the asphalt back to Paris. Next morning, I met the truck with its 2 sleepy-looking drivers in the car park of our engineering centre. It was cold and dark, and with a dank February drizzle. It was too early for the finance department to be there. In any case, I hadn't followed anything remotely resembling a procurement procedure here. I wrote the guy a personal cheque for the $6,000 on the hood of his truck. I gave him my business card and told him he knew where to find me if it bounced. Now, this just reminds me of Clear and Present Danger when he buys the Huey at the end, when he goes off into the jungle. This is a man who's totally dedicated to his trade, his product. And he said, I need to get this fixed. I need to get on with this. And that's why I think he's our sort of guy. The next 2 weeks were simultaneously the most exhausting and the most fulfilling of my professional career. So he goes into quite some detail in the book, and I won't go into all of it as to how they worked out what was going on. So they took all the footage from the onboards. BBC gave it to them, but they had to sign an NDA so they could see what happened. And I can remember him phoning me saying, we've got the onboard from the BBC, that's really kind. And I can go through that, and they could see my reactions, and they could see the power cut. And that helped them start to diagnose what had happened, because the thing had burnt to a cinder. Aluminium, when it gets that hot, just turns into a powder. But there were some bits and bobs that had survived. But I remember having one conversation with him as I walked Clifton Village. I was on my mobile phone. I walked to where I lived, to the coffee shop, and we were having one chat. And he said, "You're okay, aren't you?" I said, "I'm absolutely fine." And I walked back to my house, and I looked at my overalls. And when Nomex gets too hot, it goes brittle. Those that have ever had that, it goes brittle and it crumbles. And I picked up the race suit that I'd been wearing that day, and the left arm fell off it.
Whoa.
I did have a bit of a burn up my arm. Never told anyone. Wasn't too bad, but we were really close to being in trouble, Eddie and I. And actually, Eddie did a podcast about this. He was a briefer, which is odd for him. And I think what struck me, again, talking to one of my children about it after the event, when they were talking about, scrapes Daddy's been in. The reality is, if we'd been going downhill, we'd be dead. It was only because we were going uphill. Pure serendipity. We were going uphill when we had this problem, and therefore the car coasted to a halt. If we'd been going downhill, the brakes would have failed. We never would have stopped. We wouldn't have got out of the car, and we would have either gone over the edge or we would have burnt inside it. There's no way that... Well, there's a way that we might have had some luck, but we'd have had to have been very lucky because the brake lines had gone. Anyhow, the findings, or the process I went through, were fascinating. And I'll tell you what happened. I love this. So it was so hot that the aluminium engine block had melted. But they worked out that it was quite clear it was a fuel leak, and they could tell this from lots of chemical analysis. And they'd been using lots of processes that I don't even understand, electron microscopy and chemical spectroscopy, to analyse what they thought the problem might be. we were able to simulate the most likely aggressive element that might have damaged a fuel line. So effectively, there's a fuel line that comes from the front tank, goes back, and they reckon that when you slide the car around, it's possible that something was chaffing on that fuel line. The most likely culprit was a fingernail-sized 8mm nut on the front of the engine. As the engine moved around on its mountings, which it does as the car is drifted in inverted commas through a corner, as Chris had been doing, we could show that it might come into contact with that particular nut. We'd actually found the nut when we sifted patiently through the wreckage. The aluminium engine block had melted, but the nut had been found in a cocoon of ash. So this is proper aircraft investigation. They found this thing. They asked the Central Materials Lab at Renault to analyse it using the two processes I mentioned. I know this sounds like a bad episode of NCIS, but I promise you it's true. We were able to find microscopic abrasion of the nut where the high-strength plastic of the fuel line had rubbed against it, slightly rounding and polishing the metal crystals. Even more unbelievably, the chemists were able to ascertain that liquid fuel had been spilled on the nut before the fire, i.e. a fuel leak had happened there, before the whole lot went up. So we had our source of fuel.
Wow.
So on the back of that, they redesigned the fuel lines. The BBC gave them a fairly strict deadline if they wanted to appear on the show. And sure enough, they fixed all the test cars, made these adjustments, and the car turned up to the studio on the day we were filming, because we used to do the full studio then, and the Stig would do the lap and everything. And they turned up and did it. I can't believe the efforts they went to. When you read this chapter of the book, this is a €1 million investigation. But ultimately, I suppose by driving the car like a complete yobbo, we uncovered a fault that was lurking in the vehicle, and maybe, just maybe, we saved them from further embarrassments later in life. I don't know. We're not claiming any help there, but if you lob early build cars around, sometimes you discover things. But for me, it was a slight check on mortality, because if we'd been going downhill, I think we were in trouble. The heat that came out of the car was more extreme than I ever admitted at the time. But it was so exciting. I just think it involved outrageous driving. It involved outrageous videoing. It involved everyone ultimately coming together to help solve something. And it's an episode I'm really proud of, actually. I think that the BBC handled it really well. I've had my beef with the BBC over recent years, but they gave... Sorry, that's my daughter. They gave Renault the right to reply, and they didn't do anything sensationalist. In previous eras, you can imagine that would have been front page of everything, and they'd have made a real meal of it, but they didn't. And I think whenever I see an Alpine, and there's one that lives right opposite where I live, an orange one, it's beautiful, I always smile. And whenever I see one, I always smile, because I could have, as Spike Milligan said, my part in his downfall, I could have been a part of the downfall of that car, and I'm really glad that I wasn't, and that so many people enjoy them. But it was an interesting day at the office.
Very good.
Amazing.
And it's a wonderful car. I'm so glad that it's still around. Well done,
It's a wonderful, wonderful car, and Manish should try one.
You love it.
It could be your fourth classic car one day.
So this is another. I've plugged this before. Dave Twohig's book is a really interesting insight in what it's like to work on that side of the motor industry, and also it's published by Veloci. And I just saw on the inside you can also buy a copy of First Principles, the official biography of Keith Duckworth. I mean, you've got to have that, haven't you? Why wouldn't you want that? The father of the DFV. Get me in there. Right, let's move on. We're going to do a 2-car garage. And it works thus. It's very simple. It just says, you live in southeast England and spend a lot of time in Cornwall. You have £50,000 for 2 cars. Budget is tight. Let's go with Neil with an N.
I think when we look back, when we're, I don't know, in our old people's homes, pissing in our trousers, or whatever happens when you're 80 years old, if you're not dead, which obviously is even worse, we will look back at the mid-era of 2012 to maybe 2018, before all the shit started arriving on cars, as peak car era. Because they're modern enough that you've got all your bits and bobs, and they haven't got all the bits and bobs you don't want of all the cars that unfortunately you buy now that are made worse by the people that don't really like cars. And I think driving behind a Porsche V8 Panamera, I just thought, actually, even though I can't fit a Ridgeback in it, so it doesn't really totally work for me, what a fantastic car Mr. Cooper owned. And I think Porsche mid 2010 to 2017 just nailed it. They're just great bloody cars, engineered brilliantly, screwed together well. I was going to do the obvious thing of having a Land Rover, L302 or whatever. It's going to break down. The buttons are lovely, and you can, put the heated seats on with your gloves and all that sort of lovely shit the Land Rovers do. But you're going to end up a Manish at some point in Honiton on the it's going to happen to you in a Land Rover.
Ending up a Manish.
Because they look gorgeous, and I really wanted to go Range Rover, but actually a 2012, 13 V8 Panamera, probably a bit leggy, but you probably can get one for 25 grand.
Yeah.
I think that's magnificent. So I'm doing that. And then you need a sports car, and you're going to stick with Porsche because what is it, 981, before they sort of buggered it up with 718, you're going to do a fabulous little Boxster manual, Boxster S, 981, isn't it? 981, that era, 2013, 14, 15. You're going to keep looking on piston heads. So you get a nice colour, gold with caramel, manual. It's going to cost you 20 grand, and really you could get the cheaper one for like 12 grand, but it's Balsalt or some shit colour. So you're going to get two mid 2010 to 2016 Porsche, and they're never going to leave you on the side of the road, and they're actually a pleasure to bloody drive. And beat that.
Yeah, we're going to struggle. Manish, go for it.
I was walking around St. Mawes on the Saturday and the Sunday, and I was impressed by how narrow some of the roads were, how steep some of the gradients were, and how deep some of the potholes were. In fact, I saw Mr. Clifford reversing out of the Idle Rocks hotel car park, and the Bentley had a clearance of, I would say, about 1 millimetre.
Yeah, so Rizzler. It was a Rizzler.
Oh, it honestly, literally quite scary. And I was thinking to myself, before this question was posed, what would I drive if I actually lived in St. Mawes? And I split this into the car I would leave in Cornwall and the car I would drive to Cornwall. So the car I would leave in Cornwall, and we featured it before, but I found a rather beautiful 2017 Suzuki Jimny, which I think it's kind of perfect. It's perfect for somewhere like St. Mawes. And I looked at, I found something. It's got 36,000 miles on it, 2017, and it's a manual, 85 horsepower, which is more than you need, £17,000. It is more loaded than Elon Musk.
Yes, a new
£17,000.
The new Jimny.
Is it a new one?
Yeah.
No, 2017, 36,000 kilometres.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's the new shape, isn't it?
The current.
I think that isn't that the old, slightly old shape?
It's the old shape.
Yeah, it's
Push
the
it
old
a
shape.
bit in the centre of the screen, Manish.
Sorry. There we
Centre of the
go.
screen.
Oh shit! It's the old one.
That is the last of the old ones.
Christ
Yeah.
alive.
Fuck
I
me.
love that thing.
Yeah.
But here are a couple of little details. It's only 148 centimetres wide, and it's got a ground clearance of 20 centimetres. Well, that's it. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And I think the second car, those of you who know me, so this is £17,000, leaving me with £33,000. And the second car can only be one car for me. And it is It is an Audi A4 Avant, just the newer one. It is the car that I own.
Live a little, Manish.
2-litre petrol, £33,000, metallic grey. I know what I said last week. It's got a black interior, and it's only got 12,000 miles on it. It's 201 horsepower, and I don't think that thing's ever breaking down. It's about the right size.
It probably isn't. No, it isn't breaking down.
No, so that's it. It's an Audi A4 Avant, the new one, and a chimney to keep down there.
So just to clarify this, you've been asked to choose 3 cars in an hour and 20 minutes recording, and you've chosen an Audi A4 Avant and a 456. Right. So, Neil, where are you going with this?
I've already done it.
You've already done it. Chris Cooper, where are you going with this?
I think both of these cars have got to work at both ends of the journey.
Oh,
see that I'm not sure.
I thought long and hard about this because one of the things that you discover, if you're fortunate to spend a bit of time on the coast of Cornwall or Devon or anywhere, they're all lovely, is that when you get there, actually don't do much driving. Because
it's a bloody long way to get there is the issue.
A long way to get there, and you kind of like think I've done a bit of driving, but particularly, and we're very, very lucky in St. Moritz. It is very, very lovely. And I previously on this, when we mentioned talking about the drive-through that doesn't exist that we'd like to exist, I mentioned the St. Moritz Bakery because they have wonderful pasties, and I'd like to enjoy those in other parts of the country. And on Saturday morning, Jane, who helps run the bakery with her husband Patrick and her 2 children, Jane came up to me just outside the house to say, "You must be wanting some free pasties." Not a very good Cornish accent. I'm really sorry, Jane. I said, and I was slightly befuddled. And she said,
from Bangladesh?
She must. That's the funniest you've been in a long time. I said, I was a bit befuddled. She said, "I've had loads of customers coming in saying, 'Is this the famous St. Moritz Bakery?' Because we talked about it." She said, "Thank you for mentioning St. Moritz Bakery."
Oh, sorry. There's the senior moment there.
it's joking.
I need to
give up.
to gather my Jane and the St. Moritz Bakery. I owe you an apology, and I'll make sure that I buy lots of your pasties. They are flipping delicious. That's part of the reason why.
Because I'm autistic, I just sort of whoosh above my head.
7 stone I put on in the summer was largely pasty based. Have you chosen the 2 cars?
No, not yet. Shall I bother?
Off you go.
I think you'd have, when you get there, the most important thing is you've got to have a car big enough and practical enough that you can put loads of people in it, a barbecue in it, go down to the beach, dogs, to Disco 4.
Yep.
And then I think for a bit of fun, you'd have an Elise Series 1.
Oh, lovely.
You're only driving that down there once, aren't you?
You can fix it. If anything breaks on those 2 cars, you can fix it.
Yeah, okay. Do you know what? That is a good 2-car garage, you bastard.
Elise Series 1.
There's 2 sides to this that are interesting. One is Chris Cooper, as ever, has hit the issue, which is one you keep down there, like Manish says. You know, you have a car down there and you have one that goes up and down.
I think they both got to
If you do that, you place immense pressure on the car that goes up and down.
Correct.
And if it fails, you're a bit stuffed if the other one is something that you would dread doing that journey in. And we sort of found that out on Friday, didn't we? If Chris hadn't chosen to have a 4 or 5-seater, we'd have all been stuffed. The manager would have been walking.
Well, there are seats in the back for an Integrale, for clarity.
There are. Yeah, I mean, Jesus.
I'd have a tip on my lap, wouldn't I?
Yeah. I would have, that's a privilege. So I can't work out. I still have the opinion you want to leave one down there. But Manish has really thought about this. So sometimes it's surprisingly rigorous with this stuff. So
he's usually really sloppy.
He's not, but he's really thought about. He's quite right. If you go to Cornwall in a wide car, you're like, this isn't enjoyable. So both cars, I think, have got to be quite narrow. So I'm going to have a car down there and a car that I travel up and down in.
Yeah.
The car I'm travelling up and down in, by coincidence, is a Daimler Super V8.
Oh, look at that.
That one happens to have done 32,000 miles, dark blue, clear glass, limo rear seats, electric adjustable, and I bought it today.
Oh.
So I am smug as you like. And that is, I'll tell you what's great about that car is it's very long, but it's quite narrow compared to a modern car. And your passenger, you're quite close to me. So actually, you won't have the problem in those pinch points.
Yes,
in the lanes.
yes.
The other car that I'd like down there is a weird one. I'd like a car that is fun to drive on those rare little moments you get to enjoy yourself. They're very rare in Cornwall, but you might get 3 minutes on a 12-minute journey when you can just open it up. You don't want to offend anyone, but just have a little squiz. So it's front-wheel drive and it's small.
Mm.
I just want an original 4-headlighted Integra Type R with white with red seats.
Yeah, nice.
And I wouldn't really care what condition it was in because it's quite a bare car. You go to the beach in it, throw people in the back of it, throw the dog in it, and I love those. And when that Jag breaks, you probably could get back to Southeast England in an Integra, and it wouldn't be as bad as an Elise, I don't think.
Yeah,
it definitely wouldn't be.
No, Boxer's
the roof
better.
come off, and an Elise with the roof off in the summer down there. That might actually. You know what he's thought about that? Maybe the Elise wins.
Yeah, Elise is good, but obviously I did think about that, and that's why the Boxster.
Yeah. You got the reliable version of my choice.
We've been going for a long, long time now, so we're going to call an end to this with a bit of music, please. Chris Cooper, what's your piece of music?
Thinking about Lola, and as I do often, Barry Manilow. I just think Barry Manilow is brilliant. Could It Be Magic by Barry Manilow? I know it got covered by Take That.
Lovely.
Barry Manilow's Could It Be Magic, and that building anthemic box just in a car. Brilliant.
How about Manish? What are you going to go for?
Well, reflecting on last Friday, it could only be Lou Reed's Perfect Day.
Very good. Yeah, good. Very good.
Neil with an N.
I heard today by someone very well informed that Radiohead registered a new limited company, and they do that when they are going on tour.
Oh.
Mm. And they've done that. So there's only a rumor that there's a new album coming and they're going on tour. And I thought, oh God, I hope I don't die before November because I really want to see Radiohead in live again. So I looked at my little Radiohead, and I could choose any bloody Radiohead song. I think they're all brilliant. But the Benz album, always for me, is the first song because that's excitement when you play the album for the first time. Planet Telex. It is mind-bogglingly hair on the back of your neck good.
Can't argue with that. Love all of Radiohead.
Very good.
I've been using my Tidal, and I can't work out if it's my son's. But the fact he's at the same time and he's young and funky. I've heard of Nils Lofgren before, but there's a song called Keith Don't Go, and there's a live performance of it, and it's extraordinary. It's a really wonderful piece of music, and I found myself wanting it to go on and on and on. So try that.
Nice.
That was most enjoyable. Chris Cooper got something to say.
Just one last parish notice, because we love things to do with all things with engines, aviation, all those kind of things. Today, it was announced that the last of The Few, Churchill's very famous The Few, never in the history of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few, the RAF pilots in World War II. It was announced today that the last of them, Captain John Hemingway, passed away. That's the last link to that generation. So we raise a glass to him.
He was 105.
105 and all the rest of the few.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you very much, Neil Clifford, Chris Cooper, Manish Pandey, and I'll thank myself, Chris Harris, for talking crap for an hour and a half about cars and Formula One. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.